friends. Welcome to another episode of Whoop with Jen. And I have an amazing guest today. I have chills. The hair is raised on my arms because Cynthia Macluskie is here, and she is a serious warrior in many aspects. And started an organization called the Autism Society of Greater Phoenix. It's an amazing community, and there's offshoots and branches, and she's just like an incredible person, and she's been living this journey for almost 21 years. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so proud to have you here. I feel like I have a celebrity in the house because you are very, very well known.
You're hilarious.
in Arizona. And when I say very well known, not just throughout our community as parents, but I know you've have a notorious reputation.
I do.
As an
it's
advocate.
Well earned.
So welcome, and you have a huge story. So who knows how long this one's going to go for? But I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your family.
Okay, so I'm a mom of one. I have a almost 21-year-old, Mark, who is, of course, the light of our life. And I'm married. And for the last 18 years, I have been doing this autism journey. So I decided, I guess, when I was working with Mark and so frustrated with the system, that as he improved, I was going to fix the system.
That's kind of a big undertaking. I mean,
yeah.
Like, when did you...
That was naive, by the way.
How old was Mark when he was diagnosed?
2.5.
So pretty early.
Yes. So we have a very, I don't know if it's unique or not, but he was an early walker talker. So I didn't know at the time that put him at risk of things. So I just during Mother's Day went back and looked at his baby book. He was walking at 7 months. And he never crawled, which at the time I didn't know was a big deal, but crawling you kind of have to do for brain development. So, and then he was talking in 2-word combinations at 10 months.
Wow.
So, and then at 14 months, we did 9 vaccines, and he was hospitalized within 3 days. And by the time we left the hospital 4 days later, he had no language at all.
Oh, my goodness.
And then pretty soon after that, he was diagnosed with autism. So it was pretty dramatic.
So I know there's a huge debate about vaccines, which I actually don't want to tackle today.
Yeah, no.
But he already had some symptoms or before he had the vaccine. So, because I know I've had people come up to me and say, oh, you look like your daughter looks different because have you had her vaccinated? And I'm like, well, she has a genetic abnormality that was diagnosed at birth. So we already knew she was going to have issues. I'm sure the vaccines might have caused a factor, but
for us,
that was...
I think it's a very individualized story because I know people who didn't vaccinate whose kids have autism.
Right.
And I have lots of friends who vaccinated whose kids don't have autism.
Right.
So I think our family definitely has a genetic predisposition to having an issue. Mm-hmm. He was probably already at risk because Dr. Melmed talks about this. High IQ kiddos are more susceptible to things they're finding. And there's a unique subset of kids with autism that were high IQ, early walker talker kiddos. So how is that all related? We have no idea.
Right.
And if you ask Autism Speaks, they'll tell you that they have no way. They now think there's 100 different kinds of autism.
At least.
Yeah, and they have no way to separate out whose is what. So any study that they do is pretty hard to figure out what works and what doesn't, because we all come from it from a different angle. Because really, autism is a junk diagnosis, really. It's based on outward behavior. So, I mean, who knows? Like, I think we're going to have to wait 50 years to get the answer to what that story is.
And I think that it evolves over time, too, because I think you have climate change factors, you have food, the amount of chemicals in our food and, and our...
Plastic,
it's endless.
Water,
pollution.
Yeah. So, I mean, who knows? Like and it's really changed. When Mark was diagnosed, they said that there was no regressive autism, and Mark was clearly a regressive autism.
I don't know what that
So
term is.
regressive autism is when you look typical, you're behaving typically, and then all of a sudden you regress into autism. So some families have children that are born and they clearly knew in the beginning that their child had autism, and then some families have kiddos that just all of a sudden regressed. And so in the beginning, the expert said that there was no such thing as regressive autism, and then all of us parents were just
Right.
insane. And I would say to them, hey, look at my video, look at my video. They never wanted to look at my video. But now when you talk to researchers, they know clearly that there is regressive autism. They don't know what causes it. And,
Sure.
and I'm sure it's different causes for different people.
Of course.
You know, so, but watching the change over the last 18 years in what like parents know versus what scientists know is fascinating to me. So I was just at a SARC event with Autism Speaks and Dr. Fry, and they were talking about this need to figure out the different kinds of autism. And I was sitting with a friend, and I'd been saying that for 15 years. And it's like, okay, finally the scientists caught up to us parents, right? Because as
Right.
parents, we are actually pretty wise. And
Right. Well, we're the most dialed into our kids.
right.
And obviously we spend a lot of time with them. And if you have time and you listen to like one of my first pods, you'll find out how I was so misguided in the medical community and I wasn't getting any help or any answers. And it wasn't until I lost my complete mind
Right.
in a doctor's office that I even was introduced to help. But it's come a long way. I mean, I've been on my journey 15 years and, I just think, I guess what I wonder is like the research, what do you think will be the benefit or the outcome of the research? Because for me, and given my daughter's needs, I'm looking for interventions. Like, I don't need an answer on why she is anymore, I think, but I just want to I just want to help her.
Right.
So I'm just curious, like if they start figuring out and they say, okay, there are 100 different types of autism, what's the outcome of that, or what's the benefit? I mean, are they looking at to prevent it? Like, I don't know if it's preventable.
Well, okay, so what I think is interesting is, researchers have a different agenda than we do as parents.
They want to be published.
We are not aligned. We are not aligned, right? So parents want answers now so they can help their child. Researchers want this solid research, and it may take them 30 or 40 years. So we're at cross purposes. So I remember being in a meeting, and a doctor asked a researcher, what do we do with all these parents that are making demands and doing crazy things? And the researcher said, can you blame them? It takes you guys 5 years to figure out the question you want to ask, 10 years to do the research, 5 years to figure out the research didn't work, 10 years more to do the other research and get the answer. Well, parents aren't willing to wait 30 years. They're just not. So they're going to jump in and try to figure it out themselves, and you can't really blame them, which is exactly what I did with Mark. When Mark was diagnosed, Dr. Melma diagnosed him, and then my grandparents didn't believe it. So my grandmother was on UC Irvine's medical board, and so they did us a favor. They did an evaluation of Mark on a Saturday, and the head neurologist told us to put Mark in an institution.
In an institution?
Yes. Yep.
Did you hit him?
It was so. Am I allowed to cuss? Because I'll tell you the story.
You can totally swear.
So my husband and I had been fighting because I wanted to do some like crazy things in his eyes. And so we go, and this doctor tells us, you just need to institutionalize them and get pregnant again. Just move on. And we
replace your son with another child?
Yeah.
That's amazing
Isn't
advice.
that nice? So that's 18 years ago. So we have come a long way. So we're in the elevator. It's my grandmother, my mother, myself, my husband, and Mark. And my husband looked at me and he goes, you know what? Fuck him. You can do whatever the fuck crazy shit you want. And that's, that was the best gift I think I've ever been given, was the permission to think for myself. Because had that doctor had something for me to do, I might not have even done this journey. But because they had no answers for me, it gave me permission to start looking for myself, which was the best thing I ever did for Mark. Like, ever.
And for a lot of us, other families.
That's true. So
I mean, when you advocate and seek out answers for your son, inevitably it's going to, pay it forward to other families. I
That's
mean,
right.
just the Facebook page alone for the Autism Society of Greater Phoenix. I mean, I posted last week because I'm having issues with Elle and her eating diet, and I got so many great positive answers, and some of them were so simple.
Yeah. Well,
Like have a gummy worm or a jelly bean. If she eats this, then she gets that. And now Elle is totally motivated, and she's now, last night ate 5 bites of cauliflower. She ate a turkey burger instead of something with gluten and cheese.
oh, good.
And she's now drinking a probiotic powder in her almond milk. Like it's just us as parents. I feel like we're the amazing people out
We
there
are the
because we
amazing
figure
people.
it out, and we're not afraid to share it. Like it's not. I've never found anyone try to hold on to that information or retain
No.
it. Like I see it in a professional employment places where people are competitive and they're trying to
Right.
climb their way to the top.
Well,
Like
what's
we all
very-
help each other.
That's right. What's very unique, Dr. Bradstreet once said to me, and he had practiced in all different states, and he said the Phoenix autism community was very unique because we were so tight and so close, and we communicate. So if one person finds something out, it spreads like wildfire. So I would have a meeting and talk about something, and 3 days later, whatever, like I'll use Dr. Helmers as an example. So he was an immunologist, he just recently retired, but he was starting to treat kiddos with autism with IVIG because they had immune deficiency. And that was something that nobody was looking into, but a good portion of our kiddos have immune deficiency, and IVIG is the treatment for that. And their autism improves, but that's just a side benefit.
Right.
So I had him speak about immune deficiency, and within a week, he had 70 new patients. And he was like, oh, slow your roll. Like, we're not exactly ready for this. And there wasn't 70 people that had attended the meeting, but it just spreads like wildfire, right? We all share information and try to empower each other. And I think that part of that is because autism is unique in the way that it started off with professionals blaming mothers for their children having autism, that whole refrigerator mom mentality. And I think that refrigerator mentality sort of is still around, unstated. But, clearly schools and other professionals are always willing to blame us moms for what's happening with our kiddos.
I have 3 hours of audio of us in a meeting with our school district several years ago of them blaming me
Right.
for everything. And I'm like, really? You want to go down there? Go down that path? Do you want to poke the mama
It's
bear?
right.
Because I'm fucking crazy.
That's right. But that's what causes us all to stick together, right? Because it's really, you sort of start to feel like everybody's out to get you, except for the autism community. We stick together, and it forces us to. And I think also if autism was like cancer in the way that the medical establishment knows exactly what they're going to do and everything's in place, and you're just basically going down a conveyor belt, then none of us would have to be creative and think or fight or do the things that we do. But because autism is really unknown, even now at this time, of what causes it, what to do about it, all the kids respond to different things, we are all forced to really kind of stick together because we have a fight on our hands.
Absolutely. And it never ends. And it's
It
not going
never
to end.
ends.
I mean, it doesn't end when we die.
No.
Because, our kids live on, hopefully,
You're right.
without us. And we just need to make sure they're taken care of and safe
But I just looked at some new research, and what is a little bit shocking. So anyway, Autism Society of Greater Phoenix has been around, I don't know if you know, 45 years.
I did not know that.
Yeah, we're the oldest autism organization in the state. So, and we've been completely run by parents this whole time. It's just parent run. And so we were applying for the tax credit so that we can
okay.
grow, right?
Yeah.
And the Department of Revenue sent us a letter that said that autism is not a chronic illness and it's not a physical disability and it's only a social issue, and therefore autism is not a diagnosis that they would let an organization use the tax credit for. So
I think the Department of Economic Security would beg to differ considering how much money they
hello.
pay.
So of course, I lost my shit. I couldn't believe it. Because again, it's just another way to discriminate against us, right? So I'm looking at all this research to try to justify why they should give us our tax credit. And I find that people with autism die 20 years younger than typical people, and they don't know why. So clearly, there's something going on that we have not yet
There's
identified.
something
Medical.
medically, because it's definitely
Right.
neurological disorder, but
Correct.
I believe that medically because I look at, my daughter and, I want her to die in my arms, like in the Notebook when the people die like together in the bed after you're reunited. Like, I don't want her, I want her to have a happy long life, but there's also that, that fear and that worry of what is it going to be like?
Right,
And
right.
I'm not here to
Take care
of her.
So I started doing the research, and there's a huge amount of medical issues that are associated with autism. And I don't know if you know, but I did a documentary years and years ago called Children Suffering in Silence.
No, I didn't know that.
It was all about medical conditions that are not diagnosed because all the doctor sees is autism. Mm-hmm. And whenever you go, like, my kid has gastrointestinal issues, well, that's just autism, can't help you. Where if your child had any other diagnosis, they would provide treatment and they would look for pain and try to help with that pain. And at the time, there was no one doing that. So I had a friend who had a kiddo who's since passed away, who we were sure was having seizures because he was losing skills. And nobody would run an EEG. And after a year, finally got an EEG, and the professionals were pissed about it, but they just were doing it kind of to shut us up. Mm-hmm. And he had 36 silent seizures in 24 hours. Oh. So through the journey with this family, he was diagnosed with many, many different things. He wouldn't eat. Turned out he had colitis. It was a train wreck of failure of the medical system to even look at him like he was a human being. And there were so many things that were going on with him that nobody wanted to see and they weren't willing to look at. And it took years to fight to get them to even acknowledge it, that I decided to do this documentary with Susan Sansari to really teach families about comorbid medical conditions and educate families that before you treat a behavior, you should make sure that it's not caused by something medical. And our kiddos express pain in very different ways. And even if they're highly verbal, they don't always tell us that they're in pain. So for instance, my son, he at 8 started eating all the time, like all the time. And when I asked him about it, he's like, listen, I have 8 stomachs. I'm hungry. And according to my husband, that has something to do with a cartoon that they enjoyed, this 8 stomach issue, which I don't know. But my rule was always investigate first. So we went to see a gastroenterologist just to make sure there was nothing going on. And he was impacted in 5 different places. And he has a motility problem. His bowel just doesn't work right. And the way that he told us about that was being hungry all the time, because a lot of kids will express pain and hunger, and when they eat, the pain goes away for a little while, so they think it's hunger. Mm-hmm. If I hadn't gone to the doctor, he was pooping every day. So if I hadn't gone to her, we would never have known that. And luckily, I had someone who was willing to see him as a whole human being. But it's a big deal. There's just a lot of discrimination even now, against our population and providing really good medical care, especially for adults with autism. So it makes me crazy.
Well, and because we are crazy, then the medical community is afraid of us, because I've had people look at me and say, well, mother's like you.
That's right.
And I'm like, shame on you.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to do what's best for my kid. But I get it, because we don't always behave politely all the time, because we're emotional.
You're fighting the entire system. You're fighting the medical, the school. Like, there is no system that you don't have to fight in.
I know.
So how sane can you be when you're fighting all the time? I mean, seriously.
I know.
I mean, it's not fair. So, and for me, it's, I started this journey before people were even talking about autism. So I lost most of my friends. We were kicked out of all sorts of groups because back then there was no Autism Speaks Autism campaign. SARC was just brand new when Mark was diagnosed. They didn't have Jumpstart. They didn't have any of their programming. Like, nobody was really talking about autism. So when Mark was diagnosed, we were excluded from everything, kicked out of everything. And then the medical community basically told us to institutionalize him. So I had to do the research myself. And when I started doing research, it was just amazing what I found. So we were we became gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, corn-free, dye-free, organic. And it was amazing, the change in him. And that was just one of the quote-unquote biomedical things we were doing. But really, when you think about it, we were just trying to clean up his environment so that his immune system
Right.
would not be overtaxed.
Well, and I think that, food is your health. Like, I think all of America should just eat that way to begin with.
Absolutely.
But, and I'm not a dietitian or anything or a nutritionist, but, I have a friend who was diagnosed with breast cancer at age 50, and her oncologist was a naturopathic oncologist, and he put her on gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan diet. And he's like, if your body isn't fighting your food toxins, it will fight the cancer. And he's brought people back from near death to full remission. And,
That's right.
So it's just difficult. It's a lot of work.
Well, it's a lot of work,
to do
and then
this.
doctors will look at you and think you're crazy when you're doing it.
Well, and then you have to fight marketing and advertising.
That's right.
And,
And all the other parents. I mean,
Yeah.
let me just say, I wanted to be the Oreo Cookie Mom. I wanted to be the junk food mom. My mother was a health food addict. We had sugar once a week. Like, I dreamed of making macaroni and cheese with the dye, like the Kraft macaroni and cheese. You know what I mean? Like, I thought that would be so fun, but that's not the journey we got to pick.
right.
We had to do something different.
So now that Mark is he's 21.
Turning 21 in July.
How does he do with his food choices?
So
now
it's-
that he's like an adult, he's in college.
That's right, and I don't get a vote. So what's interesting is there's some things we were able to add back in and some things we were not. So I would say we were free of everything till he was 11. And then at 11, the doctor at PCH said, kind of implied that my restrictive diet was dangerous. And I felt sort of threatened, like we had to
Like they might call Child Protective
Right.
Services on you.
And he wasn't growing, and they're like, maybe he's not growing because you're not giving him dairy. So I could get away with the gluten because Mark has the celiac gene.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't judging that so harshly. So we added in dairy again. And we actually didn't see a problem with dairy anymore. When we originally took dairy out, he stopped headbanging. So dairy, and when he was 5, I accidentally gave him dairy. I bought popcorn, and I bought the one with the white.
White cheddar.
Yes, and I didn't realize, and his brain shook for 3 days. He
Oh
said
my
that's what he
gosh.
that's how he described it. So we added back in dairy, and we didn't see anything, so we kept dairy in, but we only buy pasture raised dairy. We don't buy the regular dairy that people buy.
Right.
And he's not a big dairy person in general. Like, he's not a milk drinker or any of that. He's still gluten-free most of the time. He does cheat, but he will be the first one to tell you that cheating upsets his stomach, makes him emotional, and causes some bowel issues with him. And so he knows he shouldn't cheat. It's hard to not cheat when you're in college. ASU doesn't have huge gluten-free selection.
Really?
Yeah. Not impressive.
I'm surprised by that because, and I'll do a little plug for U of A.
Yeah.
they have like a dietitian on staff to address all of the.
Well, ASU does, to
needs.
be fair to ASU.
Do they?
They do. But you have to make an appointment. You have to work the issue. And when you're in college, you don't feel like doing
no,
it.
I
So
wouldn't
you
want to
can
either.
roll through the line, and there will be a gluten-free option. It may not be healthy. It may
Right.
not be good, but it'll be there. And so Mark kind of taken advantage of the dietitian, but he didn't want to. Like, he doesn't want to be somebody that has a disability or
Right.
to draw attention to it. And
Is he a sophomore? Is this the end of his?
this is the end of his
second year?
sophomore year. Yeah.
Did you homeschool him, or did he go to a private or public school?
No, homeschooled. So we
all through.
Well, we put him in developmental
12th grade?
preschool when he was 3, and at Cave Creek. And over the year, he lost skill. And I thought, well, I mean, I'm not a teacher, but I can't suck that bad. Like, how, like, you're losing skill? I mean, you're supposed to be gaining skill. And when we had our last meeting with the psychologist, he told me that Mark would never be mainstreamed, that he would never go to college, that I was delusional. And I think...
He was at age 3 when they're telling you this?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
No
like
future.
That? Yeah.
Just,
So
just give up right now.
Right. Our
Just
last
leave the country.
Right, like give it up. Like again, institutionalize it. What's wrong with you? Why are you even like trying? So I think what happened was I jumped across the table to try to strangle him, and my husband grabbed me by the waist and carried me out screaming. And I was just like, "Fuck you!"
That must have been a sight to see.
I know. I wish I had it on film. Yeah, because my husband's such
Fond
a nice
memories.
guy. But it was just like it was so offensive, and I thought I had never even heard of homeschooling, but all I knew was we weren't going to do that because I had read Stephen Covey, and he talks about you only rise up to the level that people have the expectation for you, and I'm like, why would I put him in a system where their expectation is for him to fail?
Right.
What is the point of that? He won't ever be his best person. I don't know what his best person is going to be, but he has a right to achieve whatever that is.
And when we were in the public school, I think we were at our IEP meeting and they were giving me L's goals for the next year. And of course they don't give them to in advance. They just, hand you like 60 pages to read at a table within, a 30-minute time frame. And I can't remember the quantity, but they were like, she's going to learn 12 sight words this year. And I'm like, 12 sight words? 2 a month? How bad of a teacher are you?
Right.
They're like, well, we don't want to push her. We don't want her to be stressed out. And I'm like, you're stressing me out because you have such low expectations for my kid.
It's horrible. So, I brought him home and I told my husband, I think I'm going to homeschool. I'm going to go to the library and look this up. I vaguely heard of something called homeschooling. And I checked out a bunch of books and we went to California and I sat on the beach and I read like every homeschool book I could find. And my husband was like, is that legal? Can you do that? Are you even allowed? You're not a teacher. And I'm like, well, I have a degree from Boston University, so I'm not an idiot. How hard can it be? I mean, he's 3. I can get it if he's, in high school. Maybe I can't do that, but I'm going to try. So we brought him home, and I tried homeschooling for 3 months, and he had made more progress than he had the entire year before.
That's amazing.
So then I'm like, okay, I'm all in.
You should have opened up your own school.
Oh, right? Well,
let's just add one more thing to your plate. Can you help the rest of us?
Back then, they didn't have ESA or any of that, right? And at the time, that year, Cave Creek got sued by 4 other students in Mark's class, and they lost. The psychologist was fired. The special ed director, I think, was fired. But my husband finally said to me one point, he's like, and this is very true. I think you'll attest to this. I always want my own way. And I always think I know what's right for Mark. And so my husband was like, are we going to sue every year? Because Melmed wanted us to sue and we could have won. But my husband's point was, are we going to sue every year? Because you're going to have a fight with somebody every year. Right. And like, neither one of us are lawyers, so I'm not sure we can afford to sue every year. So I decided to stop fighting and just take care of my kid. Mm-hmm. And when he was doing really well, that's when I decided to get sort of involved. So in the first 7 years, I'd say like we did, well, from 3 to 7 for sure, we did 45 hours of therapy a week. So I had professionals and I was doing it, back then there was no BCBA in our state. There was no ABA. Right. None of that existed. So I sort of created my own program with floor time and Montessori, and I designed my own thing and we did it. And then at 7, he was doing really well, and we decided to take a break for a year because I felt like I worked him really hard.
Sure.
And kind of unschooled, had fun, tried to build a relationship. And that's when Gretchen Jacobs asked me to help run a bill for autism, to change autism insurance law. And I said, no, thank you. I'm not interested. And then she hounded me like crazy and connected me with 7 other moms that I did not know. And the 7 of us ran autism insurance legislation. So it was nice. SARC ponied up the money for lobbyists, but they needed parents. So it was only going to pass if parents were going to do it.
Absolutely.
And Mark, I decided that's a great homeschool experience for Mark. So we were down at the legislature for 3.5 months every day. We would go to bars at night where the legislators were, and we would and I'd bring Mark with me. Mark was so funny. Like we're in a meeting, one of the first meetings to decide whether this is going to even work, because Autism Speaks wouldn't give us money to run the bill because they did not think we could pass it in our state, and they didn't want to waste the money. And Mark gets up from the meeting, goes out somewhere, I don't know what he's doing, comes back with the white pages. And he's flipping through the white pages, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm looking for a button manufacturer, because he had already designed buttons. And he made the cutest buttons of his slogan was, did you know cancer's covered, but autism isn't? Do you think that's fair? And he was so passionate about it. So we made the buttons. I'm like, well, listen, if he thinks we can do it, why aren't we going to, like, it's just the adults that always doubt, right? He was totally committed. So we're giving buttons away down there and everything. And I'm testifying at this Senate Health Committee meeting, and we were not supposed to make it out of that meeting. It was like, I don't know. But we only had 2 votes, so we weren't going to make it out. And I stood up and gave my speech, and Mark wrapped his arm around me and leaned in and patted me on the back. And I looked up, and the entire group of people were sobbing. And I had said something like...
I'm getting tears in my eyes right now.
I had said something like that I felt like a failure as a mother because I couldn't provide for my child, and there was no professional that could help me. And that I was lying awake at night feeling like I'm an absolute failure to my kid. And then I sat down, and the head senator called me up, and he said, get back up here. And I thought, oh my God, is he going to yell at me? What's going to happen? And he's like, I just want to tell you that you're the most amazing mom. And I'm just so impressed. And I don't ever want you to question yourself again. And then they voted, and we came out, we had a unanimous vote.
Amazing.
And when the bill finally passed, the Speaker of the House said that the bill passed because of Mark. Because Mark showed them that autism is treatable. Mm-hmm. So before, everybody was like, we're not covering autism. It doesn't matter. They're basically throwaway kids. They can't get better.
Yeah.
So why would we invest money? And I'm like, look at my kid. When he was given help, he improved. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you want to help these kids?
Right.
So,
I mean, it's like everyone, I don't think legislators figure out or realize that when you invest in human beings, you get reinvested back into the state, into the community, because they become productive.
That's
and
right.
not just someone who is institutionalized or
actually, that's why
left at home and not, contributing.
So originally the bill was run by a Democrat. But you're not going to pass a bill in this state if it's run by Democrats.
No.
We have to be honest, right? So
it's 2019. We'll see what.
Yeah, but you know what? To be fair to the Republicans, the argument we made was, you're making Medicaid pick up the bill when employer insurance should be picking up the bill. Medicaid is payer of last resort. Right. So why would you structure it to exclude business from paying for it? And so it was the Republicans that stole the bill from the Democrats and passed it. So I was pretty impressed that they saw our argument, saw validity in it. And that's just, whoever has the power, it's not a Democrat-Republican thing. Whoever has the power will steal the bill so they can pass it in their name. So the Democrats were never going to pass that bill because they didn't have enough power in the House or the Senate at the time. But it could have been the other way around, right? It could have been the Democrats. That's how it happens. So, and it was interesting. We're in the office with the Speaker of the House. There's all these lobbyists. There's us 7 parents and Mark. And Mark is sitting next to the Speaker of the House. And he's drawing something, and I can't see what he's drawing. And he slides it over to the Speaker of the House. And it's a very tense meeting. And the Speaker of the House starts laughing. And I look over, and Mark and this is so intuitive with him, he had drawn an elephant stomping on a donkey. Now keep in mind.
Does he understand?
We never discussed donkey or elephant or what that meant.
Yeah.
But we had been in so many offices that he picked up that donkey and elephant, they're 2 different things and they're not on the same side. And he picked up, we're sitting with an elephant. Right? And I'm thinking, okay, he has autism. You say he doesn't pick up clues. I mean, that's pretty impressive, right?
Well, and I know it's like, and people discount my daughter because of her speech limitations. Her receptive language is just fine.
That's right. That's right.
And they just process things and express them in such a literal way, or, just a different way. I just can't even imagine all the time and energy you've put into, things that benefit me, my family, before, we even met. I'd love for you to share a little bit about where Mark is at school and how he got there, and his huge accomplishment.
He's amazing.
I mean, does he drive? Does he drive? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So he's pretty independent then.
Yes. So, he was diagnosed with moderate to severe autism.
Moderate to severe.
Yes. So
was he ever like behavioral?
Oh gosh, have I not told you a story? Okay, so yes. So his favorite things to do is throw eggs at my walls.
Oh, lovely.
He really loved to take ketchup, milk, salad dressing, toothpaste, paint, shampoo, whatever he could get his hands on, and rub it into my white carpet. And I put a rope around my fridge and tied it off, but he got a knife and just cut it and then got into my fridge. So then I put a chain, like a metal chain with a deadbolt, like a padlock on it, seriously, for a year to try to keep him out. And it was so sad because the behavior was making me insane. Like, it was just crazy. But when I would get mad, he would look up at me and he'd go, I'm sorry. And I could see, like, he didn't want to do what he was doing, but he sort of had to do what he was doing. I couldn't figure it out. Like, I'm like, I can't discipline this because this is motivated by something deep, right?
Well, I think there's just such a compulsion element, and they want to stop, but they can't.
And so a professional might be disciplinarian, but as a mom, in your heart what's happening, and I'm like, we're not disciplining that. We have to figure out. So and then he was super smart. Like, he had no language, but he was super smart. So he figured out a way to get a chair, stack books, climb up, undo my lock to the garage, get into my car, use the remote control to open the garage door, and naked. He and the dog left the house, I don't know, at 2, 3 in the morning. He was found 3 blocks away across a major street playing in a ravine. Naked. I was still asleep. So at 6 a.m.
So you don't even know he's gone?
No. At 6 a.m. someone's banging on my door. And my husband worked the night shift, so he wasn't even home. I opened the door. There's a husband and wife with my dog and my naked kid. And they're fucking pissed. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you as a mom that you would let your kid do this?
Oh.
And
the judgment.
Oh my God, I was sobbing. And I called my husband crying, and I'm like, we have to do something, like, right now. So we put deadbolts in. So we still have them, actually. Our whole house is covered in deadbolts. You cannot get in and out of my house without a key.
Well, we always made sure we had an alarm system where it would beep if you open up a door or a window, because that's what Elle would do. Is she would, like, I'd be going to the bathroom and she'd be out the front door, and I'm like, I can't even go to the bathroom.
That's right.
But, I mean, do you think your dog was, the fact that your dog
Well, the only reason they
him,
knew where to bring him was the dog had the dog tag.
I was wondering if he could communicate his address.
And no, he couldn't. And we actually got the dog because we didn't have another child, and Melmed said we should get a dog. Mm-hmm. And the night that we came home after he said that, Golden Retriever Rescue called us and said, we have this. Before they had told us we didn't qualify because he was too young, and they don't give dogs to people with young children like that. But they had an 8-year-old dog that nobody wanted. And were we interested? And we're like, yeah. And she lived till 14. And she was his guardian. Like, she just instantly knew that he was her person. And so she always stayed with him. So he had lots of behavior. He would headbang. He would tantrum. It was just kind of a living hell in the beginning. Brought him home, started homeschooling, gluten-free, got some language, dairy-free, stopped the headbanging, soy-free, is potty trained, did methyl B12 shots. All of a sudden, he wasn't stuttering or wetting the bed at night. So we did all this biomedical stuff, cleaned out, got rid of the plastic, all the chemicals in our house. which we still do, by the way, because the more research you do on how you clean your house, it's frightening what we use.
Sure.
So we cleaned up everything, and at 7, Melmed said he was high functioning autism. And then at 11, I campaigned and I got him evaluated at the University of Connecticut in their NIH Good Outcome Study to see if he would qualify. And they accepted him, so we flew to University of Connecticut.
What was the name of that study?
It's the Good Outcome Study by Dr. Flynn. NIH funded it, and she had done one prior with younger kids, and I had heard about it, and I wanted to get Mark in it. And so we flew out there. We were there for 3 days. They did 3 days of evaluations of him and I. And then at 11, her study was about to be published. So he did it at 11. They told us, I don't know, a year later, they removed his diagnosis of autism.
They removed it.
They did. They gave him the diagnosis of ADHD and anxiety.
I'm shocked that you could ever lose that diagnosis.
So 10%.
Because it's not a disease that goes into remission. I mean...
So 10%, the new research shows, and there's been several studies now, that 10% of kiddos can lose their diagnosis. Why? What's different about them? Nobody knows. Because you can't look at that if you don't know that it happens, right? So these studies are saying, look, 10 to 20% of the kids will lose their diagnosis. Now the question is why. So originally people were like, well, maybe he didn't really have autism. But to get into the study, you had to have, it was a very rigorous study. So we had to have proof that he had autism and it wasn't some kind of misdiagnosis. And so they did a lot of brain studies and a functional MRI and all of that, which we were never allowed to see, but basically in their mind, proved that he no longer had a diagnosis of autism. What's interesting is I started talking to other parents who had that same finding, and they did a lot of what we did. They did lots of biomedical, diet, environmental changes, and they also did lots of behavioral intervention. And so the newest research shows that 20% of kids with autism will have a very poor outcome. And those are usually people that have mitochondrial disease, metabolic disorders, some kind of genetic issue. 60% will improve significantly, and then 10 to 20% can actually lose their diagnosis.
So does he have autism now? I mean, does he have that diagnosis, or is it once it's removed, it's removed?
It depends on who you ask.
Huh.
Because some people are like, that's bullshit. He can't lose it. He has autism.
Yeah.
And then other people are like, that's bullshit. He doesn't have autism. And and I think he and I both feel like we're tired of fighting with all of you people.
Right.
He's just a human being who I think it just depends on how you do it. We had a neuropsych eval done before he went to college to see what accommodations he needed. And the diagnosis that they came up with was ADHD, severe dyslexia, dysgraphia, and anxiety. So I don't know, autism or that. I mean, how do you know the difference really? Because it's such a spectrum, and I don't know that we don't have a medical test that says this is autism. So how do we know?
You mentioned before we started recording that he's kind of tired of being the poster child.
yeah, he really is. So he
Please share what he won.
Yeah, so he won the Flynn, and I don't know if people know what the Flynn is, but the Flynn Foundation does a scholarship where they give 20 students in the state of Arizona a full ride scholarship, and it's the most amazing scholarship that you can get, and they become like a family, and they stay together for the rest of their lives.
And it's a scholarship to either U of A, ASU, or NAU,
Correct.
Which is Northern Arizona University. And they also have don't they have an abroad program
yes.
too? So
they send you abroad. Yeah. They make you go to China, so we had to go to China. He begged not to go to China, and they're like, too bad, you won, you have to go. And actually, it turned out to be a really good experience. And it's an amazing process. So they invite 800 students to compete, and we were not invited. So we just invited ourselves and applied, which doesn't normally happen that way, but he's homeschooling, so nobody would think to invite him because he's not on any list, right? So it's supposed to be the kids that they think are going to be leaders. And they're trying to get leadership kids to want to stay in the state. And that's the whole motivation of the
Absolutely.
Flynn. So first you do your first interview. And so they pick 80 out of the 800. Then you do your first interview. And after that interview, you have 40. And then that 40 go on 3 little mini trips where they tour all 3 schools, meet with the president of the universities, and then they do another interview. And then they pick 20, and they extend the invitation to these 20 students. And I remember we were at NAU.
I mean, I think that this is a big deal. And I know this because my son is a senior in high school, and he applied for the Flynn, and he didn't even get past the first cut. And my son, I'm going to brag, he's a smart, awesome kids. And, when you see them competing against such high caliber, I mean, for Mark
No, it's insane.
have won is just really exemplary of all the work you've invested in him, and gotten him to where he is, where he's
I think it's a
Flynn
God
scholar.
Thing. It's God. Okay, so we're applying for the Flynn. Sunday is the due date. It's Sunday. And we realized that we got letters of recommendation from the wrong people. And so, and which was totally my screw up. Whoops. So we did a Hail Mary, and we just contacted his professors to see if any of them could do it like on the fly that day, which is
unheard of.
And I said to Mark, it's a Hail Mary.
Yeah.
It either works or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And they did. And then, so we're in NAU, and there's this cutest little girl you ever saw. Like 4.65, almost a perfect score on her SAT, volunteers at a hospital, she is an adorable. And I'm looking at her, and I'm talking to her mother, and I'm thinking, what the hell is Mark even doing in this group? Like, does he really measure up? He doesn't have a perfect score. I mean, he has great grades.
But it's also about the person. I mean, the Flynn, when we went to the session or informational session, I mean, they're looking for exceptional kids. Kids that have maybe had a tougher time or overcome some sort of, hurdle. So, I mean, I think Mark's kind of like the perfect story for what they're looking for. They're not looking for my straight A, white, middle class son,
Right.
I mean.
Right. Well, it was kind of, as a parent, you're thinking, how did we get here? And he's only the second homeschooling kid to ever win. Now, for high school, he went to community college because I couldn't teach him. Like, he's a real science kid. So he was taking calculus 2, 3. Like, I'm not going to teach calculus. I have a degree in history, so there's no way that's happening. He was taking all his physics classes. So he did have grades that they could see.
Sure.
And so anyways, he won.
And he went to ASU. And he stayed in the dorm.
Yeah, he stayed in the dorm, and he's been doing well. So, but after he won the Flynn, they did a huge. So he was we've been on Good Morning America, and he was in the New York Times Magazine, and we've had a lot of press over the years because of his story. Mm-hmm. But when he won the Flynn, Arizona Republic did like a front page article of him about having autism and then going and winning the Flynn and being at ASU. And at the time, I thought, is this okay? I asked him, do you want to do this? And he said, sure. Because everything that he's ever done for the autism community, I always gave him a vote, right?
Right.
I didn't say, you're going to do this.
Right.
I just said, do you want to do this? And he always said yes. He felt very strongly that it was his job, as someone with autism who could do it, to speak for his people and try to fight for them, and which was so touching to me. And that's kind of how I feel too. Like, we've been so lucky to have this great outcome. We kind of owe it to our community to play it forward, right?
Did you do much ABA therapy? I mean, it just sounds like, he goes from headbanging and behaviors to winning the Flynn. I don't know if I have that level of expectation for my daughter in particular, because she has other disabilities in addition to her autism diagnosis. But I mean, you kind of pinpoint Like, do you think it was like all the diet and the homeschooling? I mean, because did he get ABA therapy or
So
anything like that?
at the time that he was little, there was no ABA therapy in the state. So the wealthy were flying people in.
Oh,
And I wasn't wealthy, so we were not flying people in.
right.
And so there was not one single BCBA when we were working on the autism legislation. And all 7 parents that worked on that legislation had self-funded policies. So when we passed it, none of us actually benefited from that legislation, which was fine. I personally am not a big fan of ABA therapy. I think it should be a choice. But I really like the relationship-based therapies and
Yeah.
modalities. So we did more floor time and Montessori and RDI and those kinds of things. But definitely I worked his ass off, like 45 hours a week for years and years. And even homeschooling, I worked him more. We did tons of social thinking, Michelle Garcia Winter's work. And but this last year, he all of a sudden became really upset about having to represent the autism community.
Well, that's a big burden
Yes.
because it's not a choice because he's kind of been in the spotlight.
Yeah.
But
He's been in the spotlight
want-
for a
yeah.
long time, like for over 10 years. And he's very well known. So we'll be places and people will stop us and say, I have your picture at my desk and I look at it every day because it inspires me for my own son. Which I, as a mom, think that's so touching. I did not realize the way that it felt to him, which is a giant burden. And he has the weight of the entire autism community on his back. And then he kind of felt like everybody was waiting for him to fail, like to fall. And so he had people that were cheering for him, which was this huge responsibility. And other people were like, really? Let's see if you can really do it. Maybe you're going to fail and we'll find enjoyment in that.
Oh, it's kind of a tough microscope to be
And,
under.
so you have 2 different kinds of populations that are watching you all the time. And then I think the other thing really was at some point he just didn't want to have any disability at all. And then he started wondering.
Well, nobody likes to be different.
No. And then he started wondering, did you give me all this because I have a disability and I didn't earn it? And I don't deserve it?
Oh,
So he really
that's
started
tough.
to just struggle with he finally just said, can I just be me for a while? And I thought, well, yeah, I feel bad that you don't feel like you can just be you and just live your life and not have to have the responsibility of the world on you. So I don't know. I don't know how I would do it differently, really, but it's been hard on him. And he would tell you that he enjoyed it.
I don't think you can ever look back and wonder what you would do differently because it doesn't matter.
Well, that's true.
And that's where we have to get over the guilt and forgive ourselves for, either not knowing or making a choice at that point in time. I mean, I've had to do that with myself a lot. And that's actually why I've been doing these pods is it's kind of cathartic.
Yeah.
And therapeutic for me to go back and go through my story and be like, wow, that was a stupid mistake.
Right.
Maybe I can help someone else from, not falling into the same pitfalls.
Well, and so I don't know. I mean, I think he really enjoyed a lot of it, but at some point I think, it was time to just be your own person and not have to be responsible for everybody. So, it's the end of his sophomore year and he's doing well. He's happy. He has a girlfriend.
Ooh.
He's living with a bunch of people in a house. And
is she a neurotypical lady?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, he has a band. And he's just your typical almost 21-year-old. It's been hard for me because I was responsible for everything.
Right.
For the longest time. And now he's like, thank you. I'm ready to move on.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Well, that's typical.
Which was the goal, right?
Right. But
It's been our goal is to get them there.
But with all the time and the decades of investing in it, it's got to be really weird to have him not be in the house and for you not to
I had to put myself in therapy. I did because I was having the hardest time and also not giving my opinion. He's going to make his own mistakes and his own choices. And I kind of wanted me to be in charge of that. But that's not how it's supposed to be.
No.
So I'm having to learn to completely let go and let him be. I mean, that was the goal.
Right.
It's
You
just
got what you wanted.
Right.
Whether you like it or
super
not.
hard. It's super hard, though. It's really hard.
Well, I just love that you, I mean, we're not like super close. Like we only know each other, you know, through a couple of the meetings and stuff, but there's just an amazing connection. When Cynthia's in the room, everyone sits and listens to her because she has so much experience and is such a wealth of knowledge. And I mean, we're at 54 minutes right now.
Oh my
so
gosh.
I know, right? I told you it would go by fast. But what I'd like to do is wrap up
Okay.
for now and invite you to come back and talk about some of your other stories, kind of like within your total story.
Oh,
if
I would
you
love to do that. Love to.
Oh my gosh. So Cynthia, thank you so much for your time today. I seriously, I have a celebrity in the house. So
Oh
this
my
is,
God,
like,
you're hilarious.
Super.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
It was
you.
super fun.
Oh my gosh, and you're just an inspiration to me. And I think it's when I look to people like you who are unafraid to be the warrior, then we can all help each other.
That's right. That's what we have to
Awesome.
do.
All right, well, friends, thanks for listening to another pod, Whoop with Jen. Whoop, whoop. We'll talk soon. Bye.